Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Schade. I'm Director of the Division of Ag, and we're doing another Facebook Live. Today, I'm really excited to have Julie Cascio from the Cooperative Extension Service with us. We're going to be talking about food prep and storage and such. So she's going to give us a general rundown. So, you know, I don't want to take a lot of time in the beginning, but I just wanted to remind everybody, farmers markets are open. And so, you know, the lead in for this and why I asked Julie to come on is people are used to going to the farmer's market and saying, hey, I'm going to buy this for dinner this week, next week. And I'm like, well, why don't you buy enough, freeze it, keep it for next dinner? Because as we said, with COVID and the food supply chain disruptions that we may have, it's a good idea to start putting a bigger supply in the freezer, canning and that. So with that, Julie, why don't you introduce yourself and what you do at Ag Extension, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about food prep and storage. That'd be great.
Okay. Yes, my name is Julie Cascio. I work for the Cooperative Extension Service here in the Mat-Su Valley. Obviously, it's through the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And my background is home economics or family and consumer science, whichever you prefer. And we have changed our title, or not title, but the organization part of Cooperative Extension that we work with here, home, health, and family development, because we work with all of those things. But preserving food, protecting the food that you purchase, utilizing it well is very important. And my background is home economics. I hear it echoing. All these fun challenges with computers.
I didn't do my checklist.
Okay.
Go right ahead. Sorry, Julie.
So, well, with food preservation, which is what I thought we were talking about, but what you mentioned, David, is really important because food preparation is also involved in that. And so is just saving things for the future. In fact, next week, and you just gave me a great lead in for this one. Next week, we have an extension week with programs going on that are all on the internet. It's all that Zoom thing. And I think I sent that to you, to John, to put it on the chat box or however it is with the Facebook Live, to let people know where to go to Extension to sign up. If you're interested in any of the classes, there's like 20 different classes, but one of them is reducing waste and of the food that we have, so that we utilize the food that we have. And some of the things that are involved in that is making sure that we get the amount that we're actually going to eat. If we find that we bought too much, then store it a proper way so that it's food safe and that it keeps well for use in the future. Freezing is one of those examples for how to do it. Another example, of course, is preserving the food by drying it, or dehydrating is another way of referring to it, or by canning it. And that could be canned in jars or in cans, depending upon how you do it. And I'm missing one. Oh yeah, so those of you who are gardeners, if you have a root cellar in your area, which is a hard thing to do in Alaska, but we can, root cellars are another option for keeping food for longer purposes.
Right, and we do have that. The links are going to be in our description, and we'll make sure it's on our website and the Facebook page. So we definitely, that was one of the things is, I know you've been having ongoing programs, and that's great that next week this leads into that. So yeah, and sometimes, you know, for me as the director, I get talking a little bit and I use the words and kind of a little incorrect, you know, whether it's prep or storage and that. And so that's kind of cool that, you know, the point being is that there's all the different stages. So why don't you go ahead and kind of give your presentation, and then if we have other questions, and like I've said, we have a web page and information, and if people have things they want us to come back on with live or send you to the different programs, we're happy to do that. And one of my goals of facilitation of Facebook Live is to make sure people know these wonderful programs that the Extension and other agencies have out there. So go right ahead.
Okay, well, I wasn't planning on a presentation because believe me, that would take longer than 20 minutes. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about different kinds of ways to prepare food and or preserve food. Preparing food, there are wonderful links all over the internet on how to cook food But there's also the part on taking care of it. And for that, I would recommend that you need something that is valid, that is research-based. And the university, USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. See, I have to think about these acronyms, so complicated. USDA FSIS. And if you go to that site, they have a lot of information on how to store foods correctly. When you're getting foods home, making sure that they're safe is important. In fact, with the reducing food class, we'll talk about some of the coatings that are used on the products that you buy. What does it mean? Is it really important to know that? If we go past the best by if used by date, can we still use it? Actually, most of the time you can. There are exceptions. The one major exception is infant formula. For that, you have to go by that use by date. At the end of that use by date, throw it away. For the others, it tastes best, the quality is best before that best by or use by date. And then after that, it's still, most of those are still good for you if you've stored them correctly in the first place. It's always the key. So you just have to keep those kinds of things in mind as you're going through your products. Another aspect of this then is, so that's food safety. Sometimes we, especially during this COVID-19 era, we tend to buy more than we know we're going to eat, or maybe we're buying more than we used to because we're cooking a lot of foods instead of going out to eat as much as we used to. So that's another factor to keep in mind. And when we're purchasing those, how are we going to cook them? What are we going to do with it? What are the ingredients needed along with it? My husband just went down to visit a friend in the Cascio area, all taking, the precautions and making sure that everyone was safe and not anyway, being careful. So Paul decided that he was going to cook. And he has this great recipe that he wanted to make. We had shared it with them in the past, but they didn't have the right spices to use in the particular recipe that he chose. Well, he was able to come up with some different spices to add to that particular product, that food that he was making, and it turned out really good too. So, we always have to keep those kinds of ideas in our head as we're doing it. It might take a little more time than we're used to when we plan ahead what we're going to eat during the week or for the month. It might take some time figuring out what we have in the kitchen already so that we can use it, what we have in the freezer already that we can use, and then purchasing what we need to make sure that the foods that we intend to have and that are healthy. Of course, I would say have all the categories. You have to have vegetables, you have to have fruit, you have to have some carbohydrates, you have to have some protein foods, milk or dairy product, and make sure that you have enough to make sure that you're healthy is also important.
Yeah,
step forward and ask any questions or say something. I can go on and on.
Yeah, this is really good information, and we did have a question about, is it safe to dry raw fish? And I know it's done in the rural areas a lot. So it's like, I've heard it's not a safe way to preserve fish, that needs to be cooked and then dehydrated. And I'm like, okay, so where should she go for good information on that and a primer on that?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking it. Whenever you're doing food preservation, one of the things that, well, no, we recommend, not one of the things we recommend, but we recommend that you go to a site online that is actually from a good source. So that would be USDA has good information, but most of the USDA information for food preservation has gone through whichever extension area is doing the research on it at the time. Most recently, it's been the University of Georgia Extension. So you can go to that site, which is the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It's the University of Georgia Extension. And that's a great site because they have online all that information. Another thing you can get from us, from the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension Service, is their most recent version of the So Easy to Preserve, which has the USDA information in it as well. And so does the online site that I mentioned. The other source for those informations is from the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension Service. And I think I sent that one to John to put up. If not, it's CES PUBS, as in CES pubs, .uaf.edu, and that gives the information. So you were specifically asking about canning smoked fish.
No,
Smoking fish to dry it, okay?
Right.
So if you're going to dry it, you have to follow the correct way of doing it. And keep in mind, most people now don't use as much salt as is needed to make sure that it's completely brined enough. Brined meaning adding the salt to it. Often we add other ingredients as well for the flavor it brings, which is wonderful. But you want to be sure that you follow really good guidelines in doing that step. When you are drying it, dehydrating it, keep in mind what you're doing is just hanging it outside generally, depending upon what population you're from. If you're from our native Alaskan areas, you might have things that you do in your tribe that work really well. They've had practice with it. Gone to visit some friends who do that. Wonderful. They have these screened cabins. I would look at it like a cabin or a shed that's screened, and it has netting up so that the bugs can't get in, and they hang their fish on it, and they have a fire that goes inside and allows the smoke to go up through. Or you might have something, another way to get that flavor into the fish that you're smoking. Essentially what you're doing is drying it. To be dry enough, it has to have very minimal amount of moisture left in it. And sometimes we don't dry it quite enough for that to happen. Regardless of which method you're using, hopefully research-based so that we know that it's safe. And that's why when I mentioned the pubs from the University of Alaska Extension, it goes through that process that you're doing it. Another aspect of this is to kill any parasites that might be in it.
Right.
So freeze, generally speaking, we recommend that you freeze that ahead of time so that it comes down below 0 for the correct amount of time. And we're talking our home freezers, takes a while, especially if we're putting a lot of fish in it at once, to get the very middle of the very, remember I say this a lot for canning too, the very middle of the very stack of fish that are there to get down to 0 degrees for the correct amount of time to kill any parasites that might be in it. So I hope that helps with the answer to this question. If you have more requests or need more information on it, you're welcome to email me. And I'm jmcascio@alaska.edu. Goes to me.
Yeah, that is a great explanation. And, you know, we want to make sure that people, I think I want to reiterate what you're saying, go to sites that really you can confirm are legitimate sites. There's a lot of stuff in agriculture and in food prep and that, and I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that didn't work up here in Alaska. It might in some place, but it's sure not going to do. We don't have the heat. We have different conditions. And I think you spoke to that, is how important it is to look at your local guidelines. I mean, I've been out on the Cascio where they just dry the fish, but they've been doing it for centuries, and they know exactly how to prep it and how to lay it, you know, out on the racks and that. And I would never think about doing that myself, because there's a lot of unique things that are done to that fish, to that region, to the environment in that region. I mean, people think it's all just one and done, and it's not. Every area has different practices. And I thought you made a great point on making sure that we go to these sites. FSIS has great stuff. You are absolutely correct. So does the university and its extension stuff. That's really good. So, you know, if you got somebody that's growing a garden, and, you know, what would be your advice for the newbie? Because we've got a lot of people this year that are doing new things with gardens. I think I've seen more baby ducks and chickens imported into the state this year than I have in the last 3. You know, I get on the websites and I kind of follow who's buying and selling, and it's kind of fun to watch. People have taken very seriously home food security, but with that, you know, we want to make sure they're growing things healthy and wholesome. So what are some of those tips that you would say? Let's start with the home garden. You know, what do you do as you're growing it? What are you looking at before you know go to, you know, how do you make sure it's safe down through that whole process?
So for the growing of the garden, I'm a garden grower, but I'm not a professional on that. That's just what I like to do here at my house. So if you have any questions on agricultural things and you live in the Mat-Su area, call Steve Brown. And if you want, you know, I give you my email, I'll be glad to share his with you. He will love getting those questions as well.
Right.
If you're in a different area of Alaska, there might be another person that can help you. Casey Matney down in the Kenai area,
Right.
Julie Riley right now up in the Fairbanks area. So we have a lot of agricultural people that can really help with growing those vegetables well. So one of the things, you know, you have ducks now, or geese, not geese so much, but chickens. And so you get wonderful manure from those that you might want to put in your garden, but you have to be careful when you do it, because if it's too close to the time when you're going to pick that food and eat it, that can put not so healthy things into the food, even though it's a great fertilizer for the ground and the soil itself. You just have to be careful on when you're adding it to the areas where you're growing food that you're going to eat. But from my perspective, with the extension part, on terms of safety, when you're picking that food, we always recommend, even if it's going to your garden to do it, or if you're going out and you want to, if you've noticed on our Mat-Su Extension Facebook site, I've put up a few videos and we put a few comments in about some of those wonderful plants that we can just pick that are wild, that grow wild. Where are you choosing them from makes a difference, just as I mentioned with the garden and what the fertilizer has come from, whether it's a moose walking by or a chicken's paraphernalia that comes with it. So be careful on that. That's another reason why any of this food that we collect and we are going to eat, we want to rinse them carefully under running water. I always thought it should be cold running water, but they found out more, or that I've understood more recently, it should be a slightly like lukewarm color when you're rinsing them. Another thing, shoot, I should have brought some of those wonderful lettuces that are growing in my garden right now. I could have brought them along. I actually want to hold them under the water so that it runs constantly and runs off and takes any of the soil with it off. If I held it upside down, I might be holding it where the soil is that I want to actually come off, and it's actually being held in place even though I'm rinsing it. If you are rinsing, so another class that I teach is food safety for people who are doing this in a restaurant or a food truck or something like that. They have to be careful when they're taking one batch of ingredients and rinsing them, maybe in a sink that's full of water. Then you clean it and hang it up, put it on a colander or something so the water can come away. Or in my home, what I do is take my very clean towel and lay it out on there, roll it up so that the moisture can go away on my lettuce, whatever it is I'm using. And then for the next batch, I need a new batch of water so that any potential thing that comes from the previous one that you watered now goes away as well. Anything you wanted to add to that, David?
No, I think that's the point. I mean, I just am amazed at the groundswell of people wanting to learn to do this. And so that was one of the things I'm trying to do is, you know, I grew up on a homestead, right? I'm one of the last homestead generations. So what I didn't realize is how much my mother knew that she didn't teach me. And now that she's passed and I got to do it, I have to call my sister because she's the one who's like, how do I clean this? How do I make sure this is right? What do we want to take? What do we not want to take? You know, I was down on the farm and helped butcher beef the other day and I forgot how much work that is. So, you know, it's like, it's easy when you go buy it at the store, but when you spend the whole day doing the, you know, cutting it up, and I did hamburger. I can still remember how to do the hamburger. So I helped her out on that. So it's just trying to get people to understand there are those resources, but it takes the time. You really should go and, you know, pull out and take a quick look at food safety and remind yourself, how do you clean the counter? You don't just start and assume the counter's clean, right? You know, and what materials do you use? You know, some you can use the bleach, but maybe you got certain products you don't want to put bleach on, but those alternatives. And I really wanted them to come and know that you have those resources, and we can make sure they know those resources are out there. I've, you know, you were talking about the manure and that, and I've had people who are like, yeah, we just put it on and then we eat it that year. And I'm like, oh, that's a bad idea. You need to talk to somebody about that. And they're like, well, Mother Earth says we can do that. And I'm like, well, that story was in 100-degree weather place, not here. And there's differences, right?
Exactly.
And so those are the kind of things that just because you know, or somebody shows up from a hot place and goes, hey, this is what I did there. And it's like, yeah, bad idea here. We're different. And so, you know, I just, you know, we're just trying to get the word out that you guys are experts. You really know your stuff. And rather than have some kind of foodborne illness come around in the community or even to a family, we don't want to see that. And so I think, you know, with COVID helping, you know, people understand how critical it is with what we do in our everyday lives in cleanliness, that we can leverage that and we can help people learn and say, hey, you know, these are good hygiene practices, not only for in the kitchen, but around the house, you know, for flu seasons to come and everything else, because unfortunately in this world we live in with international travel, I don't think this is our last rodeo. This is a really bad one, but you know, we have other flu seasons and other issues. And so, you know, I'm just trying to help have that broader picture of your food needs to be healthy. You need to be healthy. I mean, I think that was, you made a point on, you know, good, healthy food. I think one of the things that I've saw from the CDC reports on COVID is people that are healthy, eating good, handle this much better, right? And
Right.
so, you know, that, you know, I don't know if you have anything that you guys have learned on that as related to what you're doing.
Well, I think you mentioned eating healthy, very important. I will add exercise in here, and gardening, another way to exercise too. So that's really important as well. I really liked that you mentioned cleaning your counters, making sure that your sink is clean. You mentioned beef, cattle, that kind of thing. Even if moose, if you're taking that apart, make sure everything is clean to begin with, that you clean your hands and everything that you're using as you go, and that you clean up afterwards, and that you work as quickly as possible to do these things. One of the things that is recommended is that things shouldn't be in that temperature between 70 and 135, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's when, if there's any botulism present that is toxic, it is going to expand quickly and quickly and quickly over time. So you have to be as careful as possible. Oh, now blew through my mind. You mentioned something else I wanted to, so maybe you're getting chicken. You're getting it from the store, or you've grown it and you've killed it and you're ready to eat it. Rinsing that is important if it's a fresh chicken that you've grown and that you're killing, and then you're going to eat it and you're going to pick away all the things. Find a place that's really safe where you can actually rinse it well. If you're buying chicken from the store and bringing it home, we used to tell you that it was an important place to rinse it in your sink in the kitchen. Not such an important thing right now. They've been rinsed, they've been taken care of. And when you, or if you choose to rinse it in your sink, then you have to, as soon as you put it in the pot that you're going to cook it in, or put it in the container you're going to put in the oven and bake, however you're going to make it, or you've cut it up and you're taking it out to grill and eat it that way, then you have to clean that surface that you're using very carefully. Wash it thoroughly, get rid of any segments that are on there first, wash it thoroughly, rinse it well, and then sanitize. Very important. Whenever you're using any meat, any poultry, even the fish, make sure that you do that step, those 4 steps in the process. And after it's sanitized, put it wherever it needs to go, or let that surface, and I'm talking equipment or surfaces that you've done it on, let that dry and then put it away.
That's really good advice. And I think that, those of us that prepare food have grown up around that. It's first nature. And then I've been in other people's homes, and I mean, you see cross-contamination, as you call it, or whatever, and you're just like, ooh, hey, you know what? I'll see you next week. You're like, yeah, that wasn't really good because you mixed your meats and your veggies and you didn't clean and you didn't prep before and after. And yeah, people get away with it for years, but when it's that one time, and that's so really, really good advice. So we've got a couple minutes left. Anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure we do, get across.
Actually, you brought something else into my head. I know, 1 minute to go, but I do want to mention this. Sometimes when we make our food, we make the right amount. We think, oh, we're going to eat it, but we have leftovers. And leftovers are fine because then we're preparing, or for us, my husband and I, actually, we prepare for two different reasons. Sometimes we make extras so that we can set half of it aside and put it in the freezer, or put it in the fridge if we're going to eat it in a day. But usually we put it in the freezer so we have a fast meal for that day when we're gardening and we don't have time to do it, that it's already ready and all we have to do is heat it to eat it. But with the other option is maybe you make extras so that you can have it for meals that you take with you for lunch on another day. So keep in mind that whenever you're doing that, keep a 2-hour rule in hand. So from the time that you start it and put it together to make the food and it gets into the oven or on the stovetop or the grill or however you're making it, only 2 hours out. And then after it's baked, you need to take care, or cooked, or however you're doing it, make sure that within that 2-hour frame, you have it back in the freezer and it's cold enough. It has to have gotten below 40 degrees within that 2 hours so that you can actually make sure that it's fine. So we want to be safe as possible. So I keep that 2 hours. There's some other variations on it, but 2 hours works.
Right, and I think people can remember that, and that actually is a good amount of time, and you get tired if you're actually prepping much more than that, unless you've got a whole day set up to canning and being full tilt on that. So that, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Why don't you give one more shout out for your classes there that you're going to be doing next week, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Again, I really want to, thank you and the university and Extension for all you guys do. A very important part of the community, and glad that we can highlight that. And, again, the links are on our Facebook description, and we'll make sure that they're available. So the last word's yours.
Well, have a great Alaskan day. Ooh, the sun is beginning to come. We've had so many clouds lately, but I'm glad because we needed the rain in our garden, so I didn't have to water it so much. So there's positives all around us, and I just have to keep focused on those positives. Thank you so much for inviting me. Join us for Extension Week classes that are of interest to you. Go online and check out what's available, and look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.
Thanks so very much, Julie. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye now.